You're watching the Power Hour. I'm your host, Larry Jones. Joining us today is Elizabeth Meredith, whose powerful story of resilience became a lifetime movie, Stolen by Their Father. She's an award winning author and inspiring voice for families everywhere. And here she is today, joining us on the show, Elizabeth Meredith. Elizabeth, how are you?
I am so well. Thank you for having me, Larry. I am really excited to be on the Power Hour.
Oh, listen, it's my pleasure. I saw your story and I had to have you on the show. Um, your story is a lifetime movie. But for people who don't know, I kind of want to jump right into this thing.
Sure.
Um, you were married, right?
Yes.
Now, where was he from? Your husband,
Greece.
ex-husband, from Greece. Okay.
Yes.
And now, how long were you guys married?
4.5 long years, but every day felt like dog years. So it felt like a long marriage. It's not good.
And he ultimately took the kids to Greece with him without your knowledge or consent, right?
Correct.
Uh,
We had been divorced at that point. I left in 1990. He waited 4 long years before he took the children and left the country.
Wow. Now, can you take us back to that moment when you realized your daughters had been, basically kidnapped? What was going through your mind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That had been held over my head even when I was married. And I was a little bit young, certainly young maturity wise when I was married. But he would say, if you ever leave me, you'll never see these kids again.
Wow.
And so we had been apart, like I said, for 4 years, and it had been kind of relentless stalking. And yet the kids and I still had a really wonderful life together. And then he started to have what I would consider sort of a flare up again of behaviors. And so when I went to pick up the children from the visitation that the courts had just recently re-allowed, I couldn't get a hold of them. They were supposed to be dropped off at the daycare. And then after that, I couldn't get a hold of him by phone. And then when I called the police, they naturally assumed that I was kind of a hysterical mother. After all, these kids were just visiting their dad. And when an officer finally made contact, he realized that, oh, he had moved out of his apartment. So
Wow.
the world dropped out, I mean, from underneath me. My children were at the most adorable ages. They were 4 and 6, and they were defenseless children. And it wasn't that they saw their father regularly. So there had been a lot of scary things that happened to them on visits before he took them and took off. And that's why I think a lot of times people will say, well, it was just their father or a mom, if that's the
Right.
situation. But if a parent does something to hurt another parent, not noticing or caring that it injures their own children, that's very dangerous.
Right. Right. Now, how old were you at the time? You were 29 years old at the time?
Yes, I was 29 when he stole the kids and left the country.
Wow. Now, where did you, now, what you did eventually was truly amazing. Where did you find the strength to even know where to begin to look
Thank
for
you.
them?
Thank you. That the kids were my life.
Mhm.
And the one thing I had promised myself and my children in my little head was I'm going to do better than the family I grew up with. And I didn't. I failed. And so by my choosing the person that became their father, it put us at risk for really a lifetime.
Right.
And so that's where the strength came from. There was nothing to lose. I had nothing else going for me but being the mother of these amazing kids. And that's probably not true. And a fabulous job working for a pittance, really, at a domestic violence survivors and offender serving agency. But I loved that work. And so I was at the place where I needed to be to get a lot of support and find meaning in my work, but my kids were the deal.
Yeah. Now, what were the biggest challenges you faced legally and logistically in trying to bring your daughters home from Greece?
Well, let's say logistically, $10 an hour I made at the time, and it was a $100,000 problem.
Mm.
So right there, I'd been out of the shelter, off of welfare, off Section 8 by then. And now I faced the biggest problem in the world. My mindset was also sometimes a hindrance because I felt like I already asked people for help when I was really poor and creating a life for my kids. I don't want to do that again.
Right.
So that was part of it. But logistically, if you talk to parents who have custody issues in their own country, just state to state or city to city, that's a big deal. But if
Yeah.
you think about talking to a government whose language you don't speak,
Yeah.
oh my word, it was very challenging. And I really had to learn the customs, what not to do, how not to offend and alienate people, and how to engage people to care, even in Greece.
Yeah.
And I still have beautiful friends there today who were so helpful. So I was very fortunate living in Alaska at the time
Wow.
and dealing with people who really cared. Pre-internet, pre-GoFundMe, people had to speak to each other.
Right.
And
Right.
I was so fortunate in that way. And I will say one more thing that is going to sound very crass, and I don't mean it to be so. But at that point, Nicole Brown Simpson, the slain wife of
Mhm.
athlete O.J. Simpson,
Right.
that case had come to the forefront. People started having conversations about family violence
Mm.
and understood that what happened to my children was an extension of family violence. I dared to tamper with the control of an
Yeah.
individual. And so that helped in a sense. People were really ready to have conversations about something that had been happening in private.
Right. Right. Now, take me to the time, the point where you make it to Greece. Right. You go
Right.
through all of this stuff, the red tape and everything. No one would hear you out.
Right.
Right. No one. And you see your children. Do they speak English at
No,
this time?
they don't speak English the first time that I reunite with them. Of course, there were two trips. The first trip, I failed to bring my children home, but I made incredible connections. So it wasn't wasted, although I wouldn't have been told that at the time. I would have told you that was a wasted trip. I also got stung by a bee and nearly lost my life because I
Oh
was
no.
allergic. So anyway, it's kind of funny. In hindsight, it's kind of funny. Went back the second trip, and when I finally reunited with my children, they did not speak my language. And I, of course, as a mom, expected like, oh, it will be so great one day. They'll run to me and hug me, and they'll be so happy to see me. And that was not the case.
Wow. Wow. Were they pretty much reluctant when they saw you? Did they like, kind of standoffish? What was it like when they saw you?
Fearful. One child was just terrified. And then
Mm.
the other one looked scared, but then happy, but then scared again. She had been told that I had died. It's
Mm.
always scary to see a ghost, you know?
Wow. Yeah.
And so it was not that easy, beautiful thing. What surprised me also was the teachers were in my corner. Greece is not a country that necessarily welcomes every non-Greek citizen to their
Yeah.
court system. But the teachers had told me in their best English, these children are not being treated well. You need to take them and go.
Wow.
And so I was unable to do so in the moment, but that was our first reunion.
Yeah. So you basically had to kidnap them back, so to speak, right?
Ultimately, we fought it out in the courts. It looked like it was going in my favor. I'm a rule follower even to this day. If the speed limit is 35, I probably go 33, much to people's chagrin. And so we fought it out in the courts, eventually lost.
Mm.
And then I took the children and did sneak through Turkey to come back to the United States and fight it out through federal courts eventually.
Right. Now, were there any moments when you felt like giving up? What kept you going during those
Yes,
points?
certainly there were times that I felt like giving up. We're running out of money, running out of support. I mean, sometimes I had people who loved us very much say, but you can have other children. Maybe this is just a sign. You should leave them alone. They'll look for you when they're adults. So there were those moments, but I knew I had a vision in my head that this was critical to their well-being and that I needed to do better for my children than had been done for me when I was a kidnapped child. And that was very, very important. And I was lucky in that I knew better to get into a relationship and have more kids while all of this was going on. I wanted them to be my focus.
Yeah.
And so that really did help. And I had wonderful support with many people. And sometimes people didn't because they didn't know how to support me.
Right, right. Now, I was going to say that you made some good friends out there. Navigating the international law must have been incredibly complex. How did you educate yourself?
It was terrifying. It was terrifying. It was so scary. I asked people what would be the worst. When people offered me advice, I listened. And I also asked people what would be the best thing I could do, what would be the worst thing. How should I dress day to day? How to behave? One of the consulate people told me from the American consulate, by all means, don't run around with a picket sign telling us about your kids because
Yeah,
that really alienates people. Don't do it. And so, when people had advice, I did listen. And I love culture. And I definitely wanted to stack the odds in my favor.
yeah. Now, what ultimately happened to your ex-husband? I'm,
Nothing.
I was going to say,
Absolutely nothing.
yeah, because he won the case there, and you just so yeah, nothing
Right.
happened to him. This
Right.
is this is wild. This is a wild story.
Yes,
You
I
know,
was arrested. I was arrested when I was in Greece one time, but he, who in theory was arrested later, was out within minutes. So really nothing happened to him. And that, yep,
yeah.
that's the breaks.
And how are your women today? They're no longer girls; they're women. How are they today?
That's right. They are wonderful humans. They are so good. And I wrote my book because I didn't want people to kind of think there was a happily ever after. And that sounds terrible. There were so many beautiful points, but one does not just get over that.
Right.
So one struggles huge. Well, I would say both have struggled with mental health and the
Mm,
post-traumatic stress disorder. One has a lot of physical health issues that came straight out of that uh,
wow.
2-year period. But they are amazing people and they do the best that they can. And we are all a flawed, dysfunctional, but loving family. And, you know, life does go on.
Wow. Shout out to them. All of you guys. Now, looking back, how did this journey change you? Not only as a mother, but as a person.
I think one thing it did was help me realize that the world is filled with billions of people, and they're really all our siblings in some fashion. And we need each other. We never know when we're going to need a total stranger. What happens to me affects people countries away, and they may not know it. And so, in some ways, it gave me a lot of hope when we are more unified, not only as a country, but as a globe. But it also helped me realize, and it took me a long time. I made a lot of parenting mistakes afterward, but that bootstraps generation and
Mhm.
just go on and be tough. And, you made it through. Now talk positive. That's not helpful. So
Right.
we need to get real about conversations about trauma and mental health.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the book is available everywhere. What's the name of the book for people who want to buy it?
Thank you. It is called Pieces of Me Rescuing My Kidnapped Daughters. And of course, that became an adaptation stolen by their father, available on television. And I am so grateful.
And I'm so grateful that you're here and things worked out in your favor. Lizabeth Meredith, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
I have loved it. Thank you so much for having me. It was so
Uh,
great to meet you finally.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's great to meet you as well.